The billionaire CEO left his pregnant fiancée 3 years later. What he sees at the charity event shocks him. James Crawford stared at the pregnancy test lying on their marble kitchen counter. His hand trembled as he loosened his tie, voice sharp, eyes cold. "There is no we in this decision, Emma. The boards approved the merger. I'm marrying Helen." Across from him, still in her hospital scrubs, Emma Thompson couldn't breathe. "But I'm pregnant," she whispered. He didn't flinch. "You'll be taken care of. My lawyers will handle everything." And then he walked out. Didn't even look back. She stood frozen in that quiet kitchen, Tess still blinking positive, realizing the man who once knelt to propose under starlight had just erased her with a single sentence. Emma didn't cry at first. She just stood there, hands on the cool edge of the marble counter, staring at the 2 pink lines like they were written in another language. Her heartbeat was louder than the silence James left behind. The scent of antiseptic from her hospital scrubs still clung to her, a cruel reminder that she had rushed home to share life-changing news with the man who didn't even flinch. Outside, the city kept moving, but inside that penthouse, something had ended. The next morning, her ATM card didn't work. Not for checking, not for savings, not even for her personal account. She tried again. Account access denied. The machine didn't know she was carrying his child, that she had shared a bed with him for 3 years, that he'd whispered promises into her skin only months ago. She leaned her forehead against the cold metal and let the weight settle in her chest. Then came the text. Crawford Technologies confirms merger. CEO James Crawford to wed Helen Chen in Singapore. A photo accompanied it. James in a tuxedo, Helen on his arm. She barely made it to the hospital bathroom before throwing up. Minutes later, her pager buzzed. "Emergency appendectomy, life or death, no time to break down." She splashed cold water on her face, pulled her hair back, and stared at her reflection. Not a fiancé, not a victim, just Dr. Thompson. The pregnancy test was still in her pocket when she stepped into the OR. 12 hours. That's all she had to get through, just 12 more hours to figure out how to be a single mother. But right now, there was a patient on the table, and she still had lives to save. Later that night, Emma sat on the on-call room cot, eating saltines and staring at the hospital ceiling. Her phone lit up again. "Your access to the following accounts has been terminated." She didn't read the rest. She powered off her phone, placed her hand gently over her stomach, and whispered to the tiny life growing inside her, "You deserve more than this." And in that moment, something in her heart, soft, bruised but unbroken, decided she would give it. She would give everything, because no man, no boardroom, no signature in Singapore was going to define what kind of mother or woman she would become. The man who chose power. Emma remembered the click of the door more clearly than his voice. And soft, final, the sound of a life being shut behind her back. The pregnancy test was still blinking positive on the counter, but it felt like it had stopped breathing when James walked away. He didn't slam the door. Of course he didn't. James Crawford never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than most men's fury. She stood in the kitchen for a long time, listening to nothing. Her hands, still slightly blood-stained from her last surgery, trembled around the edges of the counter. Somewhere in her mind, she kept waiting for him to come back. Say it was a test, a mistake, a moment of panic. But he didn't. And by the time the silence grew too thick to breathe in, Emma had already made a decision she didn't know she was capable of. She picked up her phone, texted one person, "Sarah." "He's gone." There was no need for explanation. Sarah had seen the way James's smile changed once the merger talks started, how he stopped bringing dinner to the hospital, how he spent more time flying to Singapore than coming home. Still, Emma had believed. Or maybe she just wanted to. She packed slowly that night, not because there was much to take. Most of what they had built together they'd bought under his name. The penthouse, the cars, even the dog he gave away when his schedule got too demanding. Every drawer she opened whispered, "None of this was ever yours." At 2 a.m., the keys to the apartment stopped working. She stood outside in the rain, holding a backpack with a pair of scrubs and the only copy of her ultrasound referral, stunned by the sheer efficiency of erasure. By 4 a.m., she was curled up on the on-call room cot, stomach empty, heart heavy, trying not to vomit from the rising nausea or the dread. At 6:17, her pager screamed. Code blue, pediatric wing. No time to cry, no time to mourn. Her hands moved on instinct. Intubate, stabilize, clamp. Her voice didn't tremble, her shoulders didn't fall. Only when the child's vitals leveled and the surgery ended did her knees nearly give out. She locked herself in the scrub room and collapsed against the wall, tears falling silently. Not because James left, but because she had just saved a child's life, while wondering if she could survive the one growing inside her. Hours blurred into days. The hospital became her shelter, the cafeteria coffee, her meal plan. Her best friend Sarah found her curled up in the break room, clutching her stomach between shifts. "Come stay with me," Sarah had said. "I can't," Emma's voice cracked. "I don't even have a toothbrush." "Then I'll buy 10, Sarah replied, "but you're not sleeping here another night." The spare room was still decorated in college posters and half-packed boxes from Sarah's last breakup. But to Emma, it felt like a sanctuary. She didn't say thank you, just quietly placed the pregnancy test on the nightstand like a badge of grief and beginning. By week's end, the legal documents arrived. Silence money, waivers, corporate NDAs. Her name was printed in small font. Her child's name was left blank. She didn't sign. She didn't cry either. Instead, she brought the pages to Sarah's cousin, a no-nonsense family lawyer who barely looked up from her coffee as she muttered, "He's trying to buy your voice. Let's make sure he never owns it." That night, as Emma lay awake beside the steady sound of Sarah's sleep down the hall, she felt the first flutter in her stomach, like a whisper, a heartbeat reaching for her. She pressed both hands over the place her baby lived and murmured into the dark, "You're mine. You're enough. We're going to be okay." And for the first time since James walked away, she believed it. Not because she had money or protection or certainty, but because she had something he would never understand. A reason to rise, a reason to fight, a reason to choose love over power. And this time, she would never let go. 9 months to fight. Emma learned to live hour by hour. Mornings began with the dry sting of nausea, the kind that settled deep and stayed long. Saltines and silence became her routine, eaten in the dim light of Sarah's kitchen before the city woke up. Her hands no longer shook during surgery, but she wore compression socks under her scrubs, partly for the swelling, mostly for the ache. No one at the hospital asked about her changing body. Doctors didn't show. They endured. By her second trimester, she moved differently. Slower, but more grounded. She still covered double shifts, still led procedures with unwavering calm. But sometimes, during post-op rounds, she'd rest her hand just above her belly, as if to remind herself that even in exhaustion, she was never alone. The legal battle stayed quiet. For now. Sarah's cousin Michael played chess with James's lawyers behind the scenes. Each document they sent was colder than the last. Non-disclosure, asset release, silence, in exchange for comfort. Each time, Emma returned the pages unsigned, not out of pride but principle. One evening, Sarah returned home to find Emma asleep at the kitchen table, head on an anatomy textbook, the pregnancy test still tucked into her coat pocket like a folded promise. "You can't keep running on caffeine and duty," Sarah whispered. Emma stirred, eyes puffy. "I don't know how to do anything else." "Then start with breathing," Sarah replied gently. "I've got a crib in the garage. You focus on staying human." The baby kicked for the first time that night. Emma had been slicing apples, her newest craving, when she felt the soft flutter beneath her ribs. She froze, one hand still on the cutting board, the other drifting instinctively to her stomach. "Hey," she whispered, voice cracking. "You're really in there." She sat on the floor right then, legs crossed, hands over her bump, and cried harder than she had in weeks. Not from fear, not from grief. The wonder, from the terrifying, beautiful weight of knowing that something inside her was choosing to grow, even when everything around her had been torn away. 3 weeks later, her research proposal was approved. Fully funded, lead position, her name on the grant. No Crawford in sight. The night the hospital celebrated, Emma stood quietly in the back, soda water in hand, watching her colleagues toast to the future she wasn't sure she could carry alone. Sarah slipped beside her, eyes glowing. "You're doing it," she whispered, "without him. Without anything." "I'm terrified," Emma confessed. "Good," Sarah said. "It means you care. It means you'll show up. Not just for your patients, for your kid." The third trimester came fast. Emma moved into a small apartment a few blocks from the hospital. It had no view, no marble countertops, no luxury, anything. But it had sunlight, and quiet, and space for a crib beside her bed. She hung up a mobile of stars and stitched her name into the baby blanket herself, something her mother used to do. Every day, she whispered to the child growing inside her. "Left, but I stayed, and I will keep staying every day." By week 39, the baby had dropped. Emma was on light duty, officially on maternity leave, but when an emergency cardiac case rolled in, a 6-year-old in need of complex surgery, she came in for consultation. The attending hesitated. "You ready to pop, Thompson?" Emma adjusted her coat. "Then we better make it quick." In the OR, surrounded by beeping monitors and sterile light, Emma's hands moved with their usual calm, until a wave of pain, sharp and deep, gripped her side. She steadied herself against the table. "Your blood pressure's rising," the nurse warned. "I know what it's doing," Emma muttered. "Just a few more minutes." The child's heart fluttered back into rhythm as her body betrayed her. Normal sinus rhythm. Stable. The moment she heard it, Emma staggered back. "I think I'm in labor." They got her on a gurney as the OR blurred around her. A nurse changed her into a gown. Someone texted Sarah. Contractions came fast, hard, furious. But through all of it, she asked only one thing. "How's the patient?" "He's fine," Sarah assured her, brushing damp hair from Emma's forehead. "Now focus on your own heartbeat." 14 hours later, Lucas James Thompson entered the world. Tiny fists, screaming lungs, dark curls plastered to his head. He clung to Emma's finger like he'd waited years just to find her hand. "It looks like..." She started. "Like you," Sarah said firmly. "Strong, stubborn, beautiful." A nurse stepped in with a massive bouquet. The card was simple. "Congratulations, Margaret Crawford." Emma didn't ask how she knew. Didn't throw it away either. "Put them by the window," she said. Later that night, alone with Lucas, Emma traced the outline of his nose, his chin, pieces of the past folded into the future. "I don't know how I'll do this," she whispered. "But I'll never stop trying." And as his tiny fingers wrapped around hers, she knew she didn't have to be everything right away. She just had to stay. Stay through the brokenness. Stay through the fear. Stay, because love, when chosen fiercely, was already enough. The baby that changed everything. Lucas changed everything. Not with noise, but with presence. The kind that softened Emma's edges even when her world was still sharp. He didn't cry much. He just watched, wide-eyed, as if trying to memorize the face of the woman who never once left his side. Emma learned to feed him between charting cases. Nap while he rested on her chest. Hold him while standing over research notes. Her arms became his cradle, and the world around them adjusted. Sarah moved a whiteboard into the living room. "Baby's milestones here," she said, drawing rows. Underneath it, she added another row. Emma's milestones. Number of hours slept, papers published, diapers changed with one hand. By month 6, Lucas was sitting up, babbling in syllables that sounded dangerously close to scalpel. By month 9, he figured out how to open medical journals, not read them, just flip through the pages like a little professor. In training, at 1 year, he took his first steps in the hospital hallway, right toward the pediatric ward, arms outstretched to a nurse holding a plush heart toy. Emma cried then, not because of what he walked toward, but because of what he walked away from. Fear. Shame. The name Crawford. Lucas was born without resentment. He didn't carry his father's absence, only his mother's determination. Emma used her nights to build a research model, a surgical simulation, a proposal for a pediatric heart valve that might change the survival rate for infants born with congenital defects. It wasn't glamorous. It was spreadsheets and sleepless nights, breast pumps and grants, late-night ramen over medical trials. But it was real, and it was hers. Margaret sent letters every few months, handwritten, no mention of James, only questions about Lucas, his words, his appetite, his favorite toy. Emma never wrote back, but she kept the letters in a drawer beside Lucas's socks. One day, when he asked about the woman who sent books wrapped in navy ribbon, she would tell him. But not yet. Not while his world was still simple and safe. By the time Lucas turned 2, it became clear to everyone, this wasn't just a bright child. This was brilliance. Raw, uncooked, extraordinary. He built a 48-piece dinosaur puzzle in less than 10 minutes. Spoke in full sentences, counted backward from 20. One day, he watched Emma close a cardiac simulation on her laptop. "That valve's too thick," he said, with a toddler's lisp. "Blood won't go fast enough." Emma stared. Sarah dropped her coffee. "He's 2, she whispered. "He's not supposed to even say valve." Lucas looked up. "I just want to help Mommy fix hearts." Emma couldn't speak for a full minute. Later that night, after Lucas fell asleep hugging a plastic stethoscope, Emma stood at the window of their apartment, looking out over the hospital rooftop. Her phone buzzed. An article. Crawford Technologies CEO's marriage in crisis. Divorce rumors swirl around Helen Chen and James Crawford. She didn't click it. She just scrolled to the end, heart still. The byline, Singapore Bureau. Half a world away, right where he left them. "Let him fall," Sarah muttered, passing her tea. "You've already risen." Emma didn't smile. She didn't need to. Instead, she opened her email and clicked send. The subject line read, "Proposal. Pediatric heart valve redesign. Phase 1. The reply came within hours. Approved. Full funding. Start immediately. She turned to Lucas's room and whispered into the quiet. "You weren't the end of my story, you were the beginning." And in the soft rhythm of his sleep, she finally believed. Love, pure, defiant, undeterred, was stronger than betrayal. She had survived the man who chose power. Now she would raise the boy who would change the world. Chapter 4. The Boy with the CEO's Mind. Lucas solved equations before he could tie his shoes. He once disassembled the microwave just to see how the beep works. When Emma caught him with a screwdriver in one hand and the manual in the other, he simply said, "Don't worry, I'm writing it down so I can put it back better." He was 3. Emma didn't tell him he was gifted. She didn't need to. Lucas understood things in ways that couldn't be taught. Not just numbers, but people. He could read silence. He could sense when Sarah was sad. And he always placed his tiny hand on Emma's when she came home late and exhausted. "Did you fix the tiny heart today?" he'd ask. And when she nodded, he'd press a hand to her chest and whisper, "Now fix yours too." It was Lucas who reminded her to keep healing. Not just patience, herself. One night, Sarah came home holding a manila envelope like it was on fire. "Emma, you need to see this." Inside were official transfer records. Ownership shares. A quiet movement of stock divided between 2 names. Emma Thompson. Lucas Thompson. Emma stared. Her hands trembled. "These are Margaret's," Sarah said. "She gave her voting shares to you." And to him. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "She never asked." "She knew James wouldn't," Sarah replied. "And maybe she's trying to fix what he broke." Emma ran her fingers over Lucas's name printed in legal ink. It didn't feel like revenge, it felt like justice. Later that night, she wrote a letter, the first and only one, to Margaret Crawford. "Thank you for believing in the future he walked away from. Lucas will never carry his father's shadow, only his mother's light. And may be your hope." The next day, Margaret called. Emma stared at the caller ID for a long time. She picked up. "I'm dying," Margaret said simply. Stage 4. They've given me weeks. Silence stretched between them like a tightrope. I don't want to see James, she added. I want to see Lucas. Emma closed her eyes. I'll think about it. The next morning, a letter arrived for Lucas, a soft blue envelope with gold stars. Inside was a note and a small wrapped package. For the boy who sees the world not as it is, but as it could be, Grandma M. Lucas opened it carefully. It was a child's stethoscope, real enough to hear a heartbeat. He placed it over Emma's chest and smiled. You're strong? He whispered. Emma kissed his forehead. So are you. By the end of that month, Emma received an invitation, not to a boardroom, not to a court, to a gala, the Henderson Children's Hospital Annual Gala. Guest of honor, Dr. Emma Thompson, Medical Innovation Award recipient. Her name was bold, alone. No Crawford, no attachments, no shadows. But it was the final line that made her breath catch. Donors include Crawford Technologies, board member in attendance. James Crawford. She stared at the screen, unmoving. Sarah looked up from the couch. You don't have to go. I do, Emma replied, because it's time he saw what he lost. Sarah hesitated. You'll bring Lucas? Emma nodded. I want him to see what legacy really looks like. She looked over at her son, curled up on the floor, building a cardboard model of a human heart from scratch. He'll never remember the man who left, she whispered. But he'll never forget the woman who stayed. Chapter 5. A Gala of Ghosts. The ballroom was bathed in gold. Strings played softly from a corner stage, and the chandeliers above flickered like falling stars. Seattle's elite moved in tailored silence, champagne flutes and polished laughter echoing through the room. Emma stood at the edge of it all, emerald gown flowing like liquid strength, her hand wrapped around Lucas's tiny fingers. He wore a miniature tuxedo and a serious expression, eyes darting across the room with quiet calculation. Are you ready? She whispered. He nodded. I'm the one giving you the award, remember? A few photographers turned their heads as they walked in. Some saw the gown, others saw the boy. Only one man froze. James Crawford stood near the bar, drink untouched, face pale beneath his practiced smile. He didn't move. Didn't blink, just stared. Emma's steps never faltered. She walked right past him, the same way he once walked out the door. Except this time, she wasn't alone. The gala host greeted her warmly. Dr. Thompson were so honored. She smiled politely, but her voice stayed measured. My son will present the award. There was a ripple in the room. Whispers, tilted heads, a few confused glances toward the boy in the tux. When the spotlight finally called her name, Emma stepped onto the stage. Lucas followed, proud, focused, already more composed than most men twice his size. She took the podium, adjusted the mic, and for a brief second her eyes flicked toward the back of the room. James hadn't moved. 3 years ago, she began, I realized something about tiny hearts. They're not weak, they're resilient. They don't just survive injury, they grow stronger because of it. The crowd leaned in. She didn't look at him again. Maybe something no medical school ever could. That sometimes, the most broken things teach us the most about courage. Applause followed, but she wasn't done. My greatest lesson didn't come from a textbook or a mentor. It came from this boy. She placed her hand gently on Lucas's shoulder. This is my son, Lucas James Thompson. He's not just the reason I became stronger. He's the reason I kept going at all. Gasps rippled through the audience. Whispers turned sharp. James's expression cracked. Lucas stepped forward, right on cue. He lifted the crystal award with both hands and looked into the mic. Congratulations, Dr. Mummy. Laughter, applause, a standing ovation. Flashes burst around them, but Emma didn't blink. She crouched and took the award, hugging her son tightly, not for the cameras, not for the crowd, but for herself. She didn't turn to see if James was still watching, but Sarah found her backstage, eyes wide. He's gone. Left the second your speech ended. Emma nodded, wiping mascara from the corner of her eye. Let him go, she said. Sarah leaned in. He looked... got. Later, as Lucas charmed the hospital board with his knowledge of cardiac chambers, Emma caught a glimpse of Silver by the exit. Margaret Crawford stood in quiet shadow, tears brimming. She gave the slightest nod. Emma returned it. Lucas tugged her hand. "Mommy, Dr. Wilson said I can see the big machines tomorrow. You thanked him properly?" "I told him about the echocardiogram, just like you taught me." Emma laughed softly. "Of course you did." A nurse hurried over. "Dr. Thompson, we've got an emergency coming in." Emma turned to Sarah, who was already reaching for Lucas. "Go," she said. "We've got the fish tank covered." Emma knelt, kissing her son's forehead. "Be good. Save the tiny heart, Mommy." And just like that, the world narrowed to one purpose again. He might have walked away from their family, but Emma walked into legacy, removing the king. The boardroom in Singapore was colder than Emma expected. Not in temperature, but in tone. Polished wood, glass walls, men in tailored suits who glanced up only briefly when she entered. Until they saw the boy. Lucas stood beside her in a navy blue blazer and white button-down, his expression unreadable as he held her laptop in both hands like a sacred briefcase. James was already seated at the far end. He looked thinner, less composed, but still cloaked in that curated detachment he'd worn since the day he left her. Until he saw Lucas. His jaw clenched, knuckles tightened on the table edge. Emma didn't pause. "Before we begin," she said, her voice calm, "I have something to share." She nodded to Lucas, who carefully opened the laptop and connected it to the projector. The screen lit up with a simple video. Lucas sitting at his study desk, surrounded by sketches of pediatric heart valves and a stack of Margaret's old engineering books. He spoke softly in the clip, explaining circulatory flow, calculating material thickness for synthetic valves, and noting improvements to current models. A stunned silence filled the room. Emma stepped forward. "This is Lucas James Thompson," she said. "IQ 164, my son, and James Crawford's son." The boardroom erupted. James didn't move. Couldn't. Emma turned back to the table. "I am voting all 18% of our combined shares, mine and my son's, in favor of the restructuring proposal. Helen Chen's motion to remove James Crawford as CEO is hereby supported." Someone stood. Papers rustled. The vote was called. James still hadn't spoken. As she packed up the laptop, her phone buzzed. A single message from Sarah. "Margaret's crashing. Get back, now." Emma looked at James for the first time. "Your mother's dying." He stood abruptly, face pale. "Wait! My lawyer will handle the rest." She didn't wait for his response. She walked out, Lucas beside her, her heels silent on the polished floor. By the time they landed in Seattle, it was too late. Margaret passed an hour before she arrived, her final breath taken with Sarah holding her hand. "She left this for you," Sarah whispered, pressing an envelope into her palm. Inside was a handwritten letter and a flash drive. Emma read it that night, sitting on the edge of Lucas's bed while he slept. "Dearest Emma, by now the board has voted. I hope they saw what I always saw, brilliance, not just in your mind but in your will. Use the drive wisely. It holds everything James hid, the backdated merger papers, stock manipulation, even the fake marriage certificate. He didn't just abandon love, he betrayed legacy. Don't use it for revenge, use it to protect Lucas. Love him enough for all of us." Emma stared at the ceiling, tears slipping silently past her lashes. The man who said, "There is no we," had tried to erase the most extraordinary us that ever existed. And now he had nothing. A week later, her phone rang. James. She almost didn't answer, but something in her heart, maybe for closure, maybe for Lucas, whispered, "Finish it." "Why?" James's voice was rough, hollow. "You lost the right to that question 3 years ago," Emma said. "Emma, please." She ended the call. He blocked his number. 3 days later, Sarah entered her office with another envelope, this one sealed, thick, formal. "He's here, downstairs. Says it's from Margaret. For Lucas." Emma found him near the hospital fish tank. Lucas's favorite place. Amber found him near the hospital fish tank. Lucas, Emma, Van Jacob. Security stood nearby. "I'll be brief," James said. "Margaret's lawyers just released this. It's for him when he's older." Emma took it without a word. "He's incredible," James added softly. "I see it. He's everything." Emma's voice didn't rise. "He's everything because I stayed. You chose a boardroom, I chose a boy. I want to meet him. Now, Emma, he's my son." She looked him dead in the eyes. "He's not a company. You don't get to acquire him after the fact." Security approached. "One more thing," James said, pulling out a second envelope. "My letter. For when he's old enough, please." She took it, only because Lucas might ask one day. "You should know," she added, "he's already surpassed your company's best engineers." At age 4, James's face collapsed. "Like father." "No," she cut in. "Like mother." She watched security walk him out. That night after Lucas fell asleep, she opened both letters. Margaret's was full of love and wisdom, and a trust fund that would follow Lucas through every lab, class, and conference for the rest of his life. James's was full of regret. Excuses written in expensive ink. She sealed both in a fresh envelope, dated it for Lucas's 18th birthday. Then she added her own. Short, honest, final. "My dearest son, your father chose an empire of glass. I chose you. It was the easiest decision I've ever made." When she finished, she returned to her room, kissed Lucas's forehead, and turned off the light. In the dark, she whispered, "Maya Mountain Dog, hi, and doesn't get to define you. Only love does." The fall of Crawford Technologies. The article hit the medical lounge before the markets even opened. Crawford Technologies begins bankruptcy proceedings. Former CEO under investigation for merger fraud. Emma scrolled past it without flinching. Lucas sat at the table across from her, pencil tapping lightly as he breezed through college-level calculus problems. He was 4. Sarah entered mid-scroll, holding a brightly colored envelope. Invitation from the Children's Research Council. Lucas is the youngest nominee in their history. Emma smiled. Let him finish his equations first. Lucas held up his page. Done. She checked his work. All correct. Sarah flopped onto the couch. "Do you know what most 4-year-olds are doing right now?" "Not being investigated by the SEC," Emma murmured. Lucas looked up, confused. "What's the SEC?" Emma ruffled his hair. "Something your daddy forgot about?" He nodded solemnly. "Is that why he wears the sad suit now?" Emma didn't laugh, but Sarah choked on her coffee. Days passed, and James didn't stop calling. Emma ignored each one until the front desk phoned. "He's in the lobby," the nurse whispered. "Says it's urgent. He won't leave." Emma sighed, then stood. "Give me 5. She found him near the entrance, slumped on the same bench where grieving families usually waited. His suit was wrinkled, his hair unstyled. He looked human. She didn't slow her step. "I've called security," she said. "I won't fight it," he said quietly. "I just wanted to give you this." He handed over a thick envelope. Margaret's last papers. For Lucas. Her lawyers just released them. Emma took it. "That's all?" James hesitated. "Helen's gone. The company's gone." She looked at him like he was glass already broken. "Seems fair." "Emma, please." She didn't blink. "You want redemption. You want a clean slate. But there are no clean slates, just consequences." He reached into his coat and pulled out a second envelope. "My letter. For him. For when he's ready." Emma took it. "He already knows who he is. You don't need to explain that." James stepped closer. "Let me meet him." "No, Emma. He's not a speech to win over. He's not a board to persuade. He's a boy. A brilliant, gentle boy. And I will not let you use him to patch the cracks you made." Security appeared behind her. James nodded to them. Just before he left, he turned back once. "He's already more than I ever was." Emma didn't reply. Later that night, she sat at her desk and opened the envelope from Margaret. Inside, legal documentation of a new fund in Lucas's name. Letters of recommendation, A note scribbled in faded ink. My last gift, a future he owns, free from shadows. Emma stared at the words for a long time. She placed it in the fireproof safe with the others. James's letter she placed in a separate file. It didn't belong in the same box. Her own, she'd already written that one. You are my reason, my miracle, my greatest act of courage. She checked on Lucas before bed. He was asleep, curled beside a copy of How the Heart Works and a doodle of his own invention. A heart valve shaped like a star. Emma kissed his forehead. You'll never have to wonder if you were wanted. Outside, the city shifted into night, but Emma's world had never been clearer. She had chosen the harder road, but it had led to something real. Not a company, not a name. A boy, a life, a legacy born of love, not lies. Chapter 8, The Youngest Genius. The auditorium pulsed with applause as Emma stepped onto the stage. Not with hesitation, but with certainty. Lucas followed beside her in his miniature white coat, chest puffed, his name stitched just above his heart. Dr. Lucas Thompson. It was a joke, but one everyone took seriously now. He was 6. The moment their feet hit the light, Emma felt a shift. Not nerves, not fear, legacy. She took the mic, adjusted it once, and began without notes. 6 years ago, I stood in a different room, she said. Pregnant, alone, afraid. All I had was a stethoscope, a child I hadn't met yet, and the quiet belief that maybe, just maybe, love would be enough. The room went still. She smiled at Lucas. Today that child is here with me, and he's not just the reason I stand, he's the reason I rose. The applause started again, but Lucas stepped forward, taking the mic with both hands. My mommy fixes hearts, he said clearly, and now I'm going to help. A stunned silence. Then thunder. People stood, people cried. Because a 6-year-old had declared a future, most grown men were too afraid to speak aloud. Backstage, Sarah laughed, dabbing her eyes. He stole your moment. Emma shook her head. No, he is the moment. At the reception, Lucas explained cardiac anatomy to med school deans, drew diagrams on napkins, corrected a surgeon's equation with a crayon. Emma watched, one hand on her chest, not because she was proud, but because she was humbled. Later that night, as they left the gala, Lucas tugged her hand. Was Daddy there? Emma froze. He pointed to the corner of the room where, moments earlier, she had caught a glimpse of a figure watching from the shadows. It looked like my picture, Lucas said, but older. Emma knelt. Yes, she said gently. He came to listen. Lucas considered. Did he clap? I think he did. Lucas nodded. Then that's enough. Emma kissed his cheek. Yes, baby. That's more than enough. They drove home in quiet. Lucas fell asleep with the award on his lap, arms wrapped around it like a stuffed animal. Emma carried him to bed, tucked him in, then sat beside him for a long time, watching him breathe. He didn't know about the board meetings, the lawsuits, the nights she cried alone in hospital supply closets. He just knew that he was loved. And in the end, that's what mattered. Across town, James watched a replay of the event online. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just placed a trembling hand on the screen as Lucas smiled into the mic. My mommy fixes hearts, and now I'm going to help. Then he turned off the video and sat in the dark, alone. Emma, meanwhile, stood on her balcony under the stars. No wine, no music, just quiet. Just the peace that comes when you know, in every part of you, that you chose the right path. Not the easy one, but the one that led home. To a boy who had changed the world because his mother never let it break her. Chapter 9. The Heir to Innovation. The plaque shimmered in the soft hallway light. The Margaret Crawford Center for Pediatric Innovation. Beneath it, Dr. Lucas Thompson Crawford, youngest certified medical researcher in U.S. history. Emma stood beside her son as the curtain dropped, and the room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, but she barely noticed. Her eyes were on him, the boy who once kicked inside her during emergency surgery, now standing tall in a white lab coat that still didn't quite fit his small frame. Lucas adjusted his glasses and turned toward the crowd. "I'm ready to begin today's review," he said, voice clear, steady. His invention, a heart valve he sketched at age 7, modeled at 8 and refined at 9, was now entering human trials. The engineers, surgeons, and researchers present weren't clapping politely. They were stunned. Some took notes. Emma stood back, watching him work, explain, answer, nod with understanding. Well beyond his years. Sarah leaned in. "He has your calm," Emma smiled. "And Margaret's fire." No one mentioned James. Even though he stood at the back of the room, silent, hands clasped, aging more with each blink, he didn't try to approach. He only touched the plaque when the room cleared, fingers resting over his mother's name, as if asking for forgiveness too late. Emma saw him. He nodded once. She returned it, brief, kind, closed. Later that afternoon, Lucas ran to her side, a tablet in his hand. "Can we start today's patient review, Dr. Mom?" Emma knelt. "Right after we eat something." Lucas pointed to the hallway. "But the echo chamber's open. You'll need energy to change the world." He grinned. "Okay, one granola bar, then revolution." As they walked, she glanced down at him. "Are you happy, Lucas?" He stopped, thought for a second. "I think so. You're here. I get to fix hearts, and everyone listens." Emma blinked back sudden tears. "That's a good life." He nodded. "And one day I'll build a new kind of hospital, one where no kid ever gets turned away." Emma stopped walking. "What will you call it?" He grinned. "The Emma Thompson Center for Unbreakable Hearts." She laughed, full and open, and pulled him into a hug. Behind them, reporters snapped photos, but this time, it wasn't about press or reputation. It was about a mother and her son, two names once erased, now etched in steel and glass and memory. Lucas tugged her hand. "Race you to the review room?" Emma took a breath. "Always." And as he ran, ahead, coat flapping, curls bouncing, laughter trailing like light, she whispered to herself. "Some legacies are built of money and metal, but the ones that last are built of love. One heartbeat at a time." Chapter 10. Built of love, not glass. Lucas stood on the hospital stage, bathed in soft white light. At 9 years old, his hands moved with surgical precision as he adjusted the model of his pediatric heart valve before a room of international experts. The simulation glowed on the screen behind him. His voice was confident, gentle, steady. Emma watched from the front row, hand resting over her own heart. She no longer introduced him. She no longer needed to. Lucas was no longer a footnote to her journey. He was the headline. His research was already changing pediatric protocols across 3 continents. He'd been invited to co-author papers, sit on advisory boards, and lead the next phase of congenital defect treatments. But none of that is what made Emma proud. It was the way he always insisted on visiting his patients after rounds, the way he remembered every name, every sibling, every fear. The way he always held their hand and said, "I was a tiny heart once too." Outside the room, a small group of children waited eagerly by the windowed lab, patients from the cardiac wing, pressing their palms to the glass as Lucas finished his explanation. He turned, bowed slightly, then whispered, "Now if you'll excuse me, I have a promise to keep." The audience chuckled softly as he jogged to the hallway and kneeled among the kids, explaining his models in crayons and metaphors, not statistics. Emma stepped out quietly and watched. James was there again, at the far end of the corridor. Older now, thinner, his suits less polished. He stood beside Margaret's memorial plaque, eyes fixed on his son. He didn't try to come closer. Didn't speak. Just nodded once, then walked away. No more claims, no more apologies. Just quiet recognition of what he'd lost. Emma turned back to Lucas. He caught her gaze and smiled. He was everything James would never be, not because of brilliance, but because of presence. Kindness. Unshakable love. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, Emma and Lucas walked through the pediatric wing hand in hand. Their coats matched. "Mom?" Lucas asked. "Yes? Did you ever think that maybe everything happened for a reason?" Emma paused, looked down at the boy beside her. His face was still soft with childhood, but his eyes carried every heartbeat she'd ever fought to protect. "Maybe," she whispered, "or maybe we gave it a reason." He nodded thoughtfully. "I think I'll call the next valve design after Grandma Margaret." Emma smiled. "Then it'll save even more lives." Lucas squeezed her hand. As they passed the nurse's station, a young intern looked up from her charts. "That's Dr. Thompson," she whispered to another. "The famous one? The one who raised the boy genius?" "No," the first nurse said quietly. "The one who never quit." Emma didn't hear them. She was already at the elevator, badge in hand, ready for one more consult, one more child. Lucas followed. "Race you?" he asked. She raised an eyebrow. "To the next miracle?" He grinned. "Always." And they ran. 2 coats, 2 shadows, 1 heartbeat. Not chasing success, but building something deeper. Not an empire of glass, but a legacy of love. The surgical lights had long since dimmed. The applause had faded. The articles had been written. The awards displayed. But none of that ever mattered to her. What mattered was this. A quiet hallway at midnight, a little boy asleep in her office, curled beside anatomy flashcards, and a soft blanket stitched with stars. Lucas. 9 years ago, he was a flutter in her belly and a reason to keep breathing when her world had collapsed. Now he was her colleague. Her miracle. Her legacy. She watched him sleep for a moment longer, then sat beside him, pulling her coat tighter. There were no headlines in this moment. No boardrooms, no cameras, no vengeance. It was peace. Just the steady, unshaken truth of what love built when everything else fell apart. She had spent so long wondering if she'd done enough. If she was enough. But Lucas never questioned it. Not once. To him, she wasn't the woman who got left. She was the woman who stayed. The woman who chose love over power. A boy over bitterness. Healing over hurting. And that choice, made one tear-soaked night with shaking hands and a too-long test, had echoed louder than any merger, louder than any betrayal. It had become music. Emma reached into her drawer and pulled out the envelope marked Lucas, 18. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. Inside were 3 letters. Margaret's, full of wisdom and protection. James's, full of regret and excuses. And hers, short, honest. "I chose you," was the easiest decision I ever made. She sealed it tighter, tucked it away again, and stood. Across the room, Lucas stirred. She knelt beside him. "I'm here." He blinked. "Did I miss the rounds?" She smiled softly. "We'll do them together in the morning." He reached for her hand. "Promised?" Emma nodded. "Always." As he drifted back to sleep, she sat beside him and whispered, "Not for him, but for the women watching her life from the other side of a screen. Maybe someone who's been left. Maybe someone still holding a broken vow. Maybe someone afraid that choosing love once was a mistake. If that's you, if you're carrying something heavy, wondering if you'll ever rise again, you already are. Because real love, the kind that heals, the kind that lasts, doesn't look like flowers or promises. It looks like staying. It looks like rising. It looks like you walking through the wreckage and building something better. One heartbeat at a time. If this story touched you, the next one goes even deeper. I'll be waiting. See you there.